Now that the original Resident Evil Trilogy is coming to GOG for PC players, let's talk a little about the proper way to play a survival horror game like Resident Evil. Some of you will be playing these titles as your first classic survival horror game, so let's start with the big one, the controls. These games are made with fixed camera angles and tank controls. The camera will switch when you cross a certain point in each room, framing spaces from angles that range from dramatic and gorgeous, to creepy and claustrophobic, to unintuitive and frustrating. It's an imperfect system, but we love it, because it creates a unique cinematic presentation that you don't get in other kinds of games. It's like there's a cameraman artistically framing each shot. Don't get hung up on not being able to see an enemy off screen. Instead, focus on how it legitimately feels like you're controlling a character in a well-directed movie. The controls will take some getting used to. I'm not sure if any of these titles will offer modern 3D controls, but even if they do, these games were designed and balanced around tank controls, and should be played that way. You have to get it into your head that up is always forward. It doesn't matter what direction your character is facing, up will make them go forward. Do not just press in the direction you want them to go. Just like how up is always forward in an over-the-shoulder game like Resident Evil 4, it's the same case here. The camera just frames you from different angles. You are steering the character by pressing the direction you want them to turn according to them, not necessarily to you. See, as my character is walking towards the camera, I'm holding up to make her walk forward. I press left and she goes to the right, which is her left. Hold back to make your character step away from something scary in front of them. It'll take a couple hours possibly to really get the feel for this control scheme, but once you do, it'll totally click and you'll be flying. What's really nice is how it works with the camera style. If up is always forward, you can just hold up to keep the character going straight no matter where the camera moves to. If you can get yourself thinking like that, you'll be good. If Resident Evil 1 is your first Resident Evil game, or your first survival horror game in general, do not play as Chris Redfield. Chris is hard mode because he only has 6 inventory slots, which makes exploration much more difficult and annoying when you don't know the game yet. And instead of Jill's lockpick that opens a bunch of doors and desks, Chris has to find individual small keys for each one, which takes up more space in his inventory. Play as Jill Valentine for 8 inventory slots and just a much smoother experience. Chris takes a lot less damage, but trust me, you want that extra space. Now, what I really want to talk about is the theory behind this genre, and more specifically, classic Resident Evil. These are games about exploration, combat, resource management, combat avoidance, backtracking, puzzle solving, and resource management. You will not have a modern map that keeps track of every puzzle location and locked door. You have to remember what door is opened by what key. If you overlook an important item in some room, nothing in the game will tell you that there's still something in that room to find. There are no hints, there are no objectives. I'm not saying this as a good thing or a bad thing, it's just how the games are. Look at every room carefully, check every single door, and keep track of where important items and puzzles are. The lasting challenge of classic survival horror games is in the comprehension of the map. Plan your routes, clear out the monsters in important areas that you think you'll need to pass through multiple times, bring 2 or 3 puzzle items with you knowing that you're going to pass those puzzle rooms on your way, and don't carry non-essential items on you if you don't know where you're taking them yet. For example, the plant chemical. What the hell is the plant chemical? Why do you need this? Well, if you don't know yet, put it away in the chest and you'll figure it out later. Maps have save rooms where you can use ink ribbons to save your progress. There are no checkpoints. You choose your moments to save. Saves are limited in number, so death carries a heavy consequence in loss of progress. This save system is designed to make you play more cautiously, feel the weight of your risks. But like any save system, it's imperfect and can be exploited. Much like how save scumming in the old 90s PC titles could allow the player to save the game after literally every common enemy is killed, essentially cheesing your way through the entire challenge, the ink ribbon system can lead to players purposely reloading their saves to pass areas more effectively and hoard resources. I think every survival horror player is guilty of that, myself included. We all get that urge to say, damn it, that room was bad. I used 2 healing items, I missed 4 shots and wasted a bunch of ammo. I'm gonna reload my last save because I know I can make it through that room a lot more efficiently. That is a very hard gamer instinct to resist, but I'm here to tell you that you have to. The most enjoyable way to play a survival horror game is to feel the consequences of your mistakes and bad decisions, and to only reload saves when you legitimately die. If you get messed up in a couple rooms and use a bunch of resources you were trying to hold on to, just swallow it. Continue on, play like you don't even have a save file to reload. Try to stay alive like a real person would. You'll get a much more authentic survival experience. You need to feel that pressure of not having enough ammo to kill everyone in the room, so you either try to maneuver around them or you try to find another connecting room to avoid them altogether. And you need to be cursing yourself and the game when you get bit by a zombie you were trying to save 5 handgun bullets on, and now you gotta use one of your last remaining healing items. If you're not playing that way, you're not seeing what people love about this genre's gameplay. So in the save rooms, you're totally safe, and you've got some of the most lovely video game music ever made, and these original Resident Evil titles are fairly generous with the amount of ink ribbons found in the map. Really, they're generous with all resources, which is one part of these classic games that hasn't aged well. People are simply much better overall these days at video games, and they're likely to find the original Resident Evil Trilogy fairly easy in the resource management department compared to the survival horror games of today. And I'd like to take a moment to comment on that. When these games came out in the 90s, we had no idea how to play them. We struggled with the controls, we made bad decisions, we died over and over, we got lost because we didn't know how to think about exploring a map like this. We were little kids, most of us. Those classic games are remembered as very tense experiences where you barely have any ammo and half the time you gotta run for your life because you can't afford to fight. Being scared to kill too many enemies because we need to save all that ammo for the big boss fights. We remember the games that way because that's what the experience was when it was brand new, when the genre was being created or popularized. But replaying classic Resident Evil 30 years later, I'm blown away by how many health packs and shotgun shells I find. It's way too much. But it didn't feel like that at the time. Modern survival horror games, whether they be the RE2 remake or new indie classics like Signalis, are trying to recreate that old resource-starved, fight-or-flight decision-focused experience we remember having back in the day, even if the original game's balance doesn't actually preserve that experience in today's standards. Yeah, so that's essentially all I wanted to say. This isn't some retrospective on the original trilogy or a deep dive into the pros and cons. I just felt like giving some advice to new players on how to enjoy the old titles as much as they can, while addressing an aspect that hasn't aged well and might affect modern players' experiences. But hey, isn't it great that these games are coming to GOG? We can only hope they're well done, and then successful, and hopefully set for a console release. Later.